6 weeks after the impossible rescue mission that had shocked the Galactic Defense Force, the war room aboard the flagship Harmony displayed a tactical situation that would have been unthinkable just months before. Holographic markers showed successful strikes against 17 Zelthrian installations, each one carried out by aircraft that belonged in museums rather than active military operations. General Kane stood before the assembled Joint Command Staff, his expression mixing satisfaction with lingering amazement. Around the table sat military leaders from 9 different species, each studying tactical reports that defied conventional military logic. At the far end of the table, Captain Morrison sat quietly beside Dr. Sarah Chen, both women looking tired but supremely satisfied. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane began, "6 weeks ago we were told that breaching Zelthrian defenses was impossible. Today I'm pleased to report that the word impossible has been permanently retired from our military vocabulary." The holographic display showed the latest mission results. 3 research facilities, 2 communication hubs, and a major weapons manufacturing complex had been destroyed in the past week alone, all by small formations of A-10 aircraft operating with minimal support. The Zelthrian Empire, for the first time in decades, was reacting defensively to enemy attacks rather than launching their own offensives. Admiral Vexhai clicked his mandibles with satisfaction. "General Kane, the intelligence data recovered from these operations has been invaluable. Dr. Chen's team has been able to decrypt Zelthrian military communications and predict their next strategic moves." Dr. Chen looked up from her data pad. "Admiral, the quantum field research we recovered has allowed us to develop countermeasures to their shield technology. But more importantly, we've learned that the Zelthrians are genuinely confused by these attacks. Their military analysts can't understand how primitive aircraft are penetrating defenses designed to stop modern starfighters." Commander Thys coiled closer to the display, studying the tactical patterns. "Dr. Chen, are you saying that the Zelthrians still don't understand how these attacks are succeeding?" "Commander, according to intercepted communications, their military leadership has requested detailed analysis from their technology departments. The consensus seems to be that the A-10 aircraft must be using some kind of advanced cloaking system or temporal manipulation technology." Morrison snorted with amusement. "They can't accept that something built with 21st century technology is outperforming their 25th century defenses. To them, effectiveness has to equal sophistication." General Kane manipulated the display to show the expanded A-10 program. "Captain Morrison, your pilot recruitment efforts have exceeded all expectations. How many aircraft are currently operational?" Morrison consulted her own data pad. "General, we now have 47 A-10s in various stages of restoration and deployment. 28 are fully operational with experienced pilots, 15 are ready for combat but need pilot training, and 4 are still undergoing mechanical restoration." She looked around the table with pride. "The pilot community responded better than I expected. Word got out that A-10s were back in combat operations, and volunteers started showing up from across human space. Most of them brought their own aircraft." Dr. Kethvar, the Altarian chief engineer, leaned forward with interest. "Captain Morrison, how have you managed to maintain such a diverse fleet of ancient aircraft? Surely spare parts and maintenance support must be problematic." "Doctor, that's one of the beautiful things about the A-10 design. The aircraft was built for easy maintenance using simple tools and readily available materials. Most parts can be manufactured using standard industrial equipment." Morrison smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose unconventional ideas had been vindicated. "Plus, the A-10 pilot community has always been obsessive about preservation and maintenance. These aircraft aren't just weapons to us. They're flying pieces of history." Admiral Vexhai studied the tactical reports with professional interest. "Captain, the success rate of these missions has been extraordinary. 43 successful penetrations of Zelthrian defenses with 0 aircraft losses. How is this level of effectiveness possible?" "Admiral, it comes down to the fundamental difference between the A-10 approach and conventional military thinking. Modern military doctrine focuses on sophisticated solutions to complex problems. A-10 operations focus on simple solutions that work regardless of the complexity." Morrison manipulated the display to show mission recordings from the latest attacks. Watch this approach to the Zelthrian weapons facility on Kepler 442b. The defense grid includes plasma cannons, particle beam arrays, and energy barriers that could stop a full fleet attack. But look what happens when my flight of 4 A-10s approaches at treetop level. The recording showed 4 angular aircraft skimming across an alien landscape, their twin engines producing distinctive contrails in the thin atmosphere. As they approached the facility, defensive weapons began tracking toward them, but the targeting computers struggled to lock onto targets moving so slowly and unpredictably. The Zelthrian gunners are excellent marksmen, Morrison continued, but their weapons are designed for fast-moving, high-altitude targets. An A-10 flying at 200 knots 50 feet off the deck doesn't match any profile in their tactical database. The recording showed the moment of attack. 4 GAU-8 cannons opened fire simultaneously, their depleted uranium rounds creating a storm of kinetic destruction that tore through defensive positions like paper. Within 90 seconds, the facility's entire defensive perimeter had been neutralized. Commander Thiss hissed with what might have been approval. "Captain Morrison, this level of firepower concentration is remarkable. How do you coordinate such precise attacks?" "Commander, A-10 pilots have been practicing coordinated close air support for over 2 centuries. We don't need sophisticated communication systems or computer-assisted targeting. We use simple radio calls and visual references." Morrison pointed to specific moments in the tactical recording. "Here, my wingman calls, 'Tally target going hot,' and I respond, 'Cleared hot, watch your 6.' That's the entire coordination protocol. Simple, reliable, effective." Dr. Chen looked up from her analysis of the captured intelligence data. "Captain Morrison, there's something in these intercepts that you should know about. The Zelthrians are developing countermeasures specifically for A-10 attacks." Kane leaned forward with concern. "What kind of countermeasures, Doctor?" "They're modifying their targeting systems to engage slower-moving targets more effectively. They're also developing kinetic barrier systems designed to stop physical projectiles rather than energy weapons." Morrison considered this information carefully. "Doctor, how long do you estimate before these countermeasures are deployed?" "Based on their development timeline, probably 6 to 8 weeks for the targeting modifications, maybe 3 months for the kinetic barriers." Morrison's expression grew thoughtful. "Then we need to accelerate operations, hit as many high-value targets as possible before they can adapt their defenses." General Kane was already considering the strategic implications. "Captain, what would you need to launch a major offensive using the entire A-10 fleet?" Morrison looked around the table, meeting the gaze of each military commander. "General, I can put 40 aircraft into the air within 72 hours, but I need target intelligence and logistical support. The A-10 may be simple, but coordinating 40 simultaneous strikes across multiple star systems requires careful planning." Admiral Vexhai clicked his mandibles with excitement. "Captain Morrison, what if we could identify the primary Zelthrian command and control facility? A successful strike against their central coordination system could cripple their entire military structure." "Admiral, that's exactly the kind of target the A-10 was designed to attack. Hard, defended, and absolutely critical to enemy operations." Dr. Chen suddenly looked up from her data pad, her expression mixing excitement with concern. "I think I've found it. The quantum communication intercepts include references to a facility designated Command Nexus Prime. Based on the communication patterns, it appears to be their primary military coordination center." Morrison leaned forward with predatory interest. "Where is it, Doctor?" "That's the problem, Captain. It's located on Zelthros Prime, their heavily defended home world. The entire planet is surrounded by defensive installations that make the Canyon facility look like a training exercise." Kane studied the intelligence data with growing concern. "Dr. Chen, what kind of defenses are we talking about?" "Orbital defense platforms with weapons that can destroy capital ships, atmospheric fighter screens that number in the thousands, and ground-based installations protected by energy barriers powerful enough to deflect asteroid impacts." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. "Doctor, where specifically on the planet is this command facility located?" "Underground complex beneath the capital city. The only access is through a heavily fortified surface installation protected by the most advanced defensive systems in the Zelthrian arsenal. Morrison's smile was slowly spreading across her face, the expression of someone who had found exactly the challenge she had been looking for. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've found our target." Commander Thiss looked alarmed. "Captain Morrison, surely you're not suggesting an attack on the Zelthrian home world, the defensive installations alone." "Commander, the Zelthrians have never been attacked on their home world. Their entire defensive strategy is based on the assumption that no enemy force could penetrate their outer perimeter. That makes them predictable." Morrison stood up and walked to the holographic display, studying the orbital mechanics of the Zelthrian home system. What if 40 A-10s, properly coordinated, could reach the planet's surface without engaging the orbital defenses? What if we could attack the command facility before anyone realized we were there? General Kane was already running calculations. "Captain, the logistics alone would be staggering. Getting 40 aircraft within range of the Zelthrian home world, coordinating simultaneous attacks across multiple targets." "General, the A-10 community has been waiting 200 years for a mission like this. Every pilot in the program would volunteer, and most of them would bring their own support crews." Morrison turned back to the assembled commanders, her expression mixing confidence with complete determination. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Zelthrians have been winning this war because nobody has been willing to take the fight to their home world. They think they're untouchable." She picked up her helmet from the table, its painted thunderbolt emblem catching the artificial light. "I think it's time we showed them what happens when humans decide that something absolutely, positively has to be destroyed." Admiral Vexhi's compound eyes reflected the tactical display as he considered the implications. "Captain Morrison, are you seriously proposing to attack the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy with 40 obsolete aircraft?" Morrison's grin was equal parts confidence and insanity, the expression of someone who had built a career out of making impossible things possible. "Admiral, 6 weeks ago, everyone said rescuing Dr. Chen's team was impossible. Today, we're discussing how to destroy the Zelthrian command structure." She hefted her helmet under her arm and headed for the door. "Sometimes the best way to end a war isn't to outlast your enemy or out-tech them. Sometimes you just have to be crazier than they are." As Morrison left the briefing room, the assembled military commanders sat in silence, each contemplating the audacity of what had just been proposed. Attacking the Zelthrian home world with obsolete Earth aircraft was either the most brilliant strategic gambit in galactic military history, or the most elaborate suicide mission ever conceived. Dr. Chen looked around the table and smiled. "Gentlemen, I think we're about to discover something very important about human military philosophy. Sometimes the most impossible victory is achieved by attempting the most impossible mission." Through the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance across the cosmos, unaware that somewhere in the depths of space, 40 vintage Earth aircraft were about to attempt something that would either end a galactic war or provide future military historians with the most spectacular defeat in recorded history. 2 weeks after her mountain supply run, Sarah was conducting a routine flight lesson when her radio crackled with an unusual transmission. "Cessna 74 Delta Charlie, this is Denver approach. We have a request for you to contact Buckley Air Force Base on frequency 128.75 immediately after landing." Sarah's student pilot, a nervous college kid named Tommy, looked at her with wide eyes. "Are we in trouble, Miss Chen?" "I doubt it," Sarah replied, though she was puzzled. Military bases didn't typically contact civilian flight instructors unless something was seriously wrong. "Denver approach, 74 Delta Charlie copies. Contact Buckley on 12875 after landing." She guided Tommy through the rest of the lesson, helping him practice pattern work and landings. But her mind kept wandering to the unusual radio call. Buckley Air Force Base was home to several military units, including elements of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. What could they possibly want with a civilian pilot flying training flights? After landing and securing the aircraft, Sarah dialed the frequency she had been given. "Buckley Tower, this is Cessna 74 Delta Charlie, as requested by Denver approach." 74 Delta Charlie, stand by for instructions." The pause lasted longer than normal radio protocol would suggest. When the controller returned, his voice was more formal than typical tower communications. 7-4 Delta Charlie, we need you to taxi to the military ramp. Follow the ground vehicle that will meet you at taxiway Alpha 3. Do not shut down your engine until directed. Sarah's confusion deepened. This wasn't standard procedure for any civilian aircraft interaction she had ever experienced. Buckley Tower, 7-4 Delta Charlie, confirm you want me to taxi to the military ramp. Affirmative. Follow the ground vehicle and maintain radio contact. A Humvee with flashing lights appeared at the designated taxiway, and Sarah followed it across the base to a restricted area she had never seen before. Military personnel in dress uniforms waited beside several official vehicles, their bearing suggesting this was far from routine. 7-4 Delta Charlie, shut down your engine and remain with your aircraft, the tower instructed. A colonel approached her plane as she completed her shutdown checklist. He was an older man with graying hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. Behind him stood a woman in civilian clothes carrying a briefcase marked with security classifications Sarah recognized but had never seen in person. Captain Chen, the colonel asked as she climbed out of her Cessna. Yes, sir, though I should mention I'm not military. I'm a civilian flight instructor. I'm Colonel Matthews, and this is Dr. Sarah Whitfield from NORAD's Advanced Projects Division. We need to speak with you about a matter of national security. Sarah felt her world tilt slightly. National security? She was a small plane pilot who delivered medical supplies and taught college students how to land in crosswinds. What could she possibly have to do with national security? I think you might have me confused with someone else, Colonel. Dr. Whitfield stepped forward, opening her briefcase to reveal a thick file folder. Captain Sarah Chen, born December 15, 1985, in San Francisco. Grandfather was Master Sergeant William Chen, who served as a flight instructor for the Army Air Corps during World War II. You learned to fly at age 16 in a 1967 Piper Cherokee. You have accumulated 3,247 hours of flight time in 43 different aircraft types, specializing in single-engine operations in challenging weather conditions. The specificity of the information was unsettling. Sarah had never provided those details to any government agency that she could remember. We've been monitoring your flight activities for the past 6 months, Colonel Matthews continued. Specifically, your ability to complete missions in weather conditions that ground other aircraft. Your success rate for supply deliveries in marginal conditions is 100%. 0 accidents, 0 incidents, 0 failed missions. I'm sorry, but I don't understand why military intelligence would be tracking civilian cargo flights. Dr. Whitfield exchanged a glance with the colonel before responding. Captain Chen, are you familiar with the concept of unidentified aerial phenomena? You mean UFOs? Sarah couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. Are you telling me this is about flying saucers? What I'm telling you is that the United States government has been tracking objects in our airspace that don't conform to known aircraft capabilities. These objects demonstrate flight characteristics that exceed anything in our current inventory. Colonel Matthews took over the briefing. 3 days ago, NORAD detected multiple bogies entering American airspace from high altitude. These objects descended rapidly and have been conducting what appears to be reconnaissance flights over military installations and population centers. Sarah's skepticism was warring with growing concern. These were serious people discussing what sounded like science fiction, but their credentials and the security measures surrounding this conversation suggested they weren't joking. Our best fighters have been unable to intercept these objects, Dr. Whitfield continued. They demonstrate acceleration capabilities that would kill any human pilot, along with maneuverability that defies our understanding of aerodynamics. Conventional interception is impossible. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Colonel Matthews pulled out a tablet displaying radar tracks and video footage. These objects have one vulnerability we've identified. They seem to have difficulty tracking small, slow-moving aircraft flying at low altitudes in challenging weather conditions. Our analysis suggests they're optimized for detecting fast, high-altitude targets with significant radar signatures. The implications began to dawn on Sarah. You think small planes might be able to approach them undetected? We think small planes piloted by exceptionally skilled individuals might be able to get close enough for our scientists to gather crucial intelligence data, Dr. Whitfield confirmed. The objects appear to ignore aircraft below certain speed and altitude thresholds, possibly because their sensors are designed to track threats moving at military aircraft speeds. Sarah looked at her modest Cessna, then back at the military officials. You want me to fly reconnaissance missions against UFOs in a single-engine trainer. We want you to consider joining a classified program that could be critical to national defense, Colonel Matthews said. The objects have shown no hostile intent so far, but their capabilities represent a potential threat, unlike anything we've ever encountered. Understanding their technology could be vital to protecting American airspace. What makes you think I'm qualified for this kind of work? I'm not a test pilot or a military aviator. I teach college kids how to avoid stalling on final approach. Dr. Whitfield smiled slightly. Captain Chen, last Tuesday you flew a medical supply mission through a mountain pass in weather that grounded every other aircraft in the state. You navigated by visual reference in near-zero visibility conditions and landed safely at a strip most pilots wouldn't attempt in perfect weather. That's exactly the kind of skill set this mission requires. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Everything about this conversation sounded impossible, yet the evidence before her suggested these people were deadly serious. The objects have been observed most frequently during periods of severe weather, Colonel Matthews added. They seem to use storm systems for concealment, which means any approach would need to be conducted in precisely the conditions you've specialized in flying. If I agreed to this, what would be expected of me? Initially, observation flights using specially modified aircraft equipped with advanced sensor packages. Your job would be to get close enough for our equipment to gather detailed readings without triggering whatever detection systems these objects possess. Sarah considered the implications. Her entire career had been built on accepting challenges other pilots avoided, on proving that skill could overcome technological disadvantages. This would be the ultimate test of that philosophy. I need to think about this, she said finally. Colonel Matthews handed her a secure phone. Take all the time you need, but understand that these objects are increasing their activity patterns. We may not have long before they move from reconnaissance to more active operations. As Sarah drove home that evening, her mind raced with questions and doubts. Everything she had known about her quiet career as a flight instructor had been shattered by a conversation that sounded like something from a movie. But as she reflected on the radar tracks and flight characteristics Dr. Whitfield had shown her, one thought kept returning. If these objects were real, and if they represented a potential threat to her country, then she had a responsibility to help defend against them. Her grandfather had flown dangerous missions over occupied Europe in World War II, training bomber crews who faced overwhelming odds. Perhaps it was time for another generation of the Chen family to step forward when their country needed them. The secure phone sat on her kitchen table, waiting for her decision. Outside, storm clouds were building over the mountains, creating exactly the kind of challenging flying conditions that had defined her career. Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee and began to consider whether she was ready to take on the greatest challenge any pilot had ever faced. Sarah stared at the secure phone for 2 days before making her decision. The tipping point came when she watched the evening news and saw reports of unexplained atmospheric disturbances over major cities. The meteorologists were baffled by cloud formations that seemed to move against prevailing winds and electrical storms that generated no lightning. Only Sarah knew what was really causing these phenomena. She dialed the number Colonel Matthews had given her. "This is Viper," she said, using the call sign she had earned years ago for her precise flying. "I'm in." Within hours, a black SUV arrived at her apartment. The driver, a serious-faced woman in military fatigues, handed Sarah a folder marked with security classifications she had only heard about in movies. "Report to Peterson Space Force Base at 0600 hours tomorrow," the woman said. "Bring nothing except essential personal items. Everything else will be provided." The drive to Peterson took Sarah through familiar Colorado landscape, but everything felt different now. She was no longer a civilian flight instructor heading to work. She was a pilot about to join the most classified program in American military history. At the base, Sarah was processed through security checkpoints that involved retinal scans, fingerprint analysis, and background checks that seemed to know more about her life than she remembered herself. Finally, she was escorted to a hangar complex that didn't appear on any base maps. Colonel Matthews met her at the entrance, along with Dr. Whitfield and 3 other people she didn't recognize. "Welcome to Project Shadowbird," Matthews said. "What you see and hear from this point forward is classified at the highest levels of national security." The hangar doors opened to reveal an aircraft unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. At first glance, it appeared to be a modified Cessna 210, but closer inspection revealed sophisticated modifications that transformed it into something extraordinary. "Meet your new mount," said Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the project's chief engineer. "We call her the Whisper. She's built around a standard single-engine airframe, but that's where the similarities end." Sarah walked around the aircraft, noting details that made her pilot's instincts sing with appreciation. The engine had been replaced with an experimental hybrid power plant that could run virtually silent when needed. The propeller was a variable pitch design that could adjust automatically for maximum efficiency at any altitude or airspeed. "The avionics suite is unlike anything in civilian or military inventory," Dr. Whitfield explained, opening the cockpit for inspection. "We have sensors that can detect electromagnetic signatures, gravitational anomalies, and energy patterns that don't exist in conventional physics." Sarah settled into the pilot's seat, immediately noticing that while the basic flight controls were familiar, the instrument panel included displays and switches she had never seen before. "The flight characteristics have been optimized for low and slow operations," Sergeant Rodriguez continued. "Maximum speed is intentionally limited to avoid triggering whatever detection thresholds these objects seem to use. She'll cruise at 90 knots and loiter at 60, but she can maintain those speeds in weather that would ground conventional aircraft." "How?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "Advanced wing design incorporating some technology we've reverse-engineered from other sources. The control surfaces are computer-assisted to handle turbulence that would overwhelm normal aircraft, but the computer can be overridden if the pilot's instincts suggest a different approach." Sarah spent the next week learning the Whisper's systems, starting with ground school that covered concepts she had never encountered in civilian aviation. Dr. Whitfield's team had developed entirely new categories of instrument flying based on the unique signatures these mysterious objects generated. "Conventional radar is useless," explained Dr. Patricia Kumar, the project's lead physicist. "These objects seem to exist in a state of quantum superposition that makes traditional detection methods ineffective. However, they do generate measurable distortions in local gravity fields and electromagnetic spectra." Sarah learned to read instruments that displayed gravitational gradient maps and electromagnetic field variations. It was like learning to fly all over again, except this time, she was tracking targets that defied every principle of aerodynamics she had ever studied. Her first training flight was conducted over the Colorado plains in perfect weather conditions. The Whisper handled like a dream, responding to her inputs with a precision that seemed almost telepathic. The hybrid engine was so quiet that she could hear wind passing over the wings even at cruising speed. "How are you finding her?" Colonel Matthews asked over the radio. "She's incredible," Sarah replied honestly. "It's like flying a ghost. I can barely hear my own engine noise." "That's the idea. Our analysis suggests these objects rely heavily on acoustic detection for tracking slow-moving targets. The Whisper's signature is virtually undetectable by conventional sound tracking systems." Over the following weeks, Sarah's training intensified. She practiced flying in increasingly challenging conditions, learning to navigate by instruments that tracked phenomena most pilots couldn't even pronounce. The hardest part was unlearning decades of conventional flying wisdom. "Forget everything you know about stall characteristics," instructed Major Lisa Park, her training officer and a former Air Force test pilot. "The Whisper's wing design generates lift through mechanisms that conventional aerodynamics don't account for. She'll fly in conditions that would stall any normal aircraft." Sarah discovered that Major Park was right during a training flight in severe turbulence. Conditions that would have sent her trusty Cessna plummeting toward the ground were handled effortlessly by the Whisper's advanced control systems. The computer is constantly adjusting wing camber and control surface positioning, Park explained over the intercom. But it's designed to enhance pilot input, not replace it. Your instincts and experience are still the primary flight control system. 3 weeks into her training, Sarah received her first real mission briefing. We've detected a significant object operating over the Denver metropolitan area, Dr. Whitfield announced during the morning briefing. It's been conducting systematic reconnaissance flights over government facilities and military installations. The radar tracks showed an object moving in patterns that made no sense according to conventional flight behavior. It would hover motionless for extended periods, then accelerate instantly to speeds that should have torn any physical object apart. Weather conditions are ideal for an approach mission, Colonel Matthews added. We have a storm system moving through the area that should provide concealment for the Whisper while allowing our sensors to gather detailed readings. Sarah studied the flight plan with growing excitement and nervousness. This would be her first encounter with one of the objects that had brought her into the program. Remember, this is strictly an observation mission, Major Park emphasized. Get close enough for the sensors to do their work, then withdraw immediately. Under no circumstances should you attempt to establish contact or engage in any way. What if it detects me? Then you use every skill that brought you to this program and get out of there as fast as possible. The Whisper is designed for stealth, but these objects have capabilities we don't fully understand yet. That evening, Sarah conducted her pre-flight inspection with unusual care. Everything about this mission felt different from her civilian flying. She was no longer delivering medical supplies or teaching students. She was about to conduct reconnaissance against technology that might be decades or centuries ahead of anything humanity had developed. The storm system was approaching from the west as Sarah taxied out for takeoff. Lightning flickered in the distance, and she could see rain sheets advancing across the plains. Perfect cover for what she was about to attempt. "Shadowbird 1, you are cleared for takeoff," the tower controller said. "Good hunting." Sarah advanced the throttles and felt the Whisper respond instantly. As she climbed into the darkening sky, she reflected on how far she had come from teaching nervous college students how to execute proper traffic patterns. The object was out there somewhere in the storm, conducting its mysterious reconnaissance. In a few minutes, she would either prove that human ingenuity and piloting skill could match alien technology, or she would discover that some challenges were beyond even her considerable abilities. The mountains disappeared behind her as Sarah turned toward Denver, where her real test was waiting in the turbulent darkness ahead. Sarah climbed through the storm system at a steady 500 feet per minute, the Whisper cutting through turbulence that would have battered any conventional aircraft. Rain drummed against the cockpit windows, and lightning illuminated towering thunderheads that rose like mountains of water vapor around her. "Shadowbird 1, this is Control," Dr. Whitfield's voice crackled through her encrypted radio. "We're tracking the target approximately 15 miles northwest of your position, altitude 8,000 feet. It appears to be stationary." Sarah checked her instruments, nodding. The gravitational distortion detector was beginning to register faint readings. The object was still too far away for detailed analysis, but its presence was definitely affecting local spacetime in measurable ways. "Control, Shadowbird 1, I'm beginning my approach from the south. Storm cover is excellent, visibility is less than half a mile." "Copy that. Remember, maintain at least 2 miles distance for initial sensor sweeps. We need to determine if it's aware of your presence before attempting closer observation." Sarah banked the Whisper toward the target coordinates, climbing steadily through the churning clouds. At 7,000 feet, she broke through the storm layer into a surreal landscape of moonlit cloud tops stretching to the horizon. And there, silhouetted against the silver-white formations, was something that made her breath catch in her throat. The object hung motionless in the sky like a dark teardrop, roughly the size of a commercial airliner, but completely wrong in every other way. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a void against the bright clouds that hurt to look at directly. No wings, no engines, no visible means of propulsion, yet it maintained perfect position despite the violent winds tearing through the storm system. "Control, I have visual contact with the target. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." "Shadowbird 1, can you describe what you're observing?" Sarah struggled to find words for something that challenged her understanding of how aircraft should look and behave. The object is approximately 150 feet long, teardrop-shaped, dark surface that seems to absorb light. No visible propulsion systems or control surfaces. It's maintaining perfect position in winds that are gusting over 60 knots. Outstanding. Begin your sensor sweep from current position. Gravitational and electromagnetic readings are priority. Sarah activated the Whisper's exotic sensor array, watching displays that showed readings she was still learning to interpret. The gravitational distortion was significant. The object was somehow creating a localized field that bent space-time around it. The electromagnetic signature was even stranger, showing energy patterns that didn't match any known technology. Control, I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies. The object appears to be generating its own field that. This doesn't make sense. According to these instruments, it's partially existing outside normal space-time. Continue monitoring. Can you move closer for enhanced readings? Sarah studied the object's position and behavior. It remained absolutely motionless despite the storm conditions, suggesting its positioning system was far more sophisticated than anything human technology could achieve. But there was something else, a pattern to the energy readings that suggested the object was conducting its own scanning operations. Control, I think it's analyzing something on the ground. The electromagnetic patterns suggest focused scanning beams directed downward. Roger that. Can you determine what it's targeting? Sarah checked her navigation display and felt her blood chill. The object was positioned directly above the Colorado Springs area, specifically over the complex of military installations that included Peterson Space Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain, and NORAD headquarters. Control, the target is conducting detailed reconnaissance of our most sensitive military installations. Whatever it's doing, it's gathering intelligence on our defense capabilities. Understood. Move to within 1 mile for detailed sensor analysis. We need to know exactly what kind of scanning technology it's using. Sarah pushed the Whisper's nose down slightly, beginning a careful approach that used the storm clouds for concealment. The object grew larger in her windscreen, and she could see details that made her pilot instincts scream warnings. The surface wasn't just dark, it seemed to move like liquid while maintaining its solid shape. Energy patterns visible to her instruments crawled across its hull like living things. At half a mile distance, every alarm in Sarah's cockpit began screaming simultaneously. Shadowbird 1, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the target. It knows you're there. The object began to rotate slowly, its pointed end turning toward Sarah's position with deliberate precision. Whatever scanning beams it had been using on the ground installations were now focused directly on the Whisper. Control, I think I've been made. The target is definitely aware of my presence and appears to be conducting active scans of my aircraft. Can you break off and withdraw? Sarah was about to answer when something impossible happened. A voice spoke directly into her mind, bypassing her radio equipment entirely. The words formed in her consciousness with crystal clarity, though she was certain no sound had actually been generated. Small craft, your approach has been noted. State your intentions. Sarah's training had covered many contingencies, but telepathic communication from alien spacecraft wasn't among them. She keyed her radio with shaking hands. Control, the target is. It's communicating with me, somehow directly into my mind. What is it saying? You carry primitive scanning devices. Are you gathering data for hostile purposes? The voice in Sarah's head was neither male nor female, carrying undertones of curiosity mixed with what might have been concern. She made a decision that would either establish humanity's first diplomatic contact or get her killed. I'm going to attempt communication, she radioed to Control, then focused her thoughts as clearly as possible. We detected your presence in our airspace. I'm here to understand your intentions. We mean no harm. Your military installations suggest otherwise. Your species demonstrates concerning patterns of aggression and territorial behavior. Sarah felt the weight of representing all humanity in this first contact scenario. Everything she said might determine whether this encounter led to peaceful relations or something far worse. We're protective of our home, but we're also curious about other forms of life. Your technology is far beyond ours. We want to understand. There was a pause that seemed to last forever. Sarah could feel the alien intelligence examining her thoughts, probing the sincerity of her statements with a thoroughness that was both invasive and strangely gentle. You are different from the others we have observed. Your presence here required significant skill and courage. Most of your kind would not attempt such an approach. I specialize in difficult flying conditions. My people chose me for this mission because they knew you would be testing our abilities. An interesting perspective. You view this encounter as an evaluation rather than a threat. Sarah realized she had stumbled onto something important. These beings weren't necessarily hostile. They were conducting an assessment of humanity's capabilities and character. Are you evaluating us for some purpose? Your species stands at a critical juncture in its development. The ability to reach beyond your planet brings both opportunities and responsibilities. We observe many worlds during such transitions. Shadowbird 1, what's your status? Dr. Whitfield's voice cut through Sarah's concentration. Control, I'm in active communication with the entity. It appears they're conducting some kind of evaluation of human civilization. Your monitoring stations are becoming aware of our conversation. This communication must conclude. Will there be other opportunities to talk? That depends on what we learn from encounters such as this one. You have demonstrated qualities we find promising. The object began to move, rising vertically with an acceleration that should have been impossible. Sarah watched her instruments register gravitational distortions that peaked off the scale before gradually returning to normal. Remember this conversation, pilot. Others of your kind may need to understand that skill and courage matter more than the sophistication of your tools. The object vanished into the storm clouds above, leaving Sarah alone in the turbulent sky with the weight of first contact settling on her shoulders. Shadowbird 1, report your status immediately. Control, the target has departed. I'm returning to base with extraordinary intelligence data. As Sarah turned the whisper back toward Peterson, she knew that everything had changed. Humanity wasn't alone, and apparently they were being judged by beings whose technology made human achievements look like stone tools. Her skill in flying small aircraft through challenging conditions had earned humanity its first real conversation with an alien intelligence. Sarah, Viper, Chen, the instructor pilot that colleagues had dismissed as lacking ambition, had just become the most important pilot in human history. The question now was whether she could help her species pass whatever test they were being given. The debriefing session lasted 18 hours. Sarah found herself facing a panel that included generals, scientists, and officials from agencies she had never heard of. Every word of her telepathic conversation had been recorded through neural monitoring equipment built into the Whisper's cockpit, and the implications were staggering. Let me understand this correctly, said General Patricia Harrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These entities are conducting an evaluation of human civilization, and our performance determines whether we're allowed to advance beyond our current level of development. That's my understanding, Sarah replied, fatigue making her voice hoarse. They're observing multiple worlds going through similar transitions. How we handle first contact and what we do with the knowledge apparently affects their decision about our future. Dr. Whitfield leaned forward in her chair. The technological readings we gathered during your encounter are unprecedented. The object you observed was manipulating fundamental forces of physics in ways that suggest they've mastered unified field theory, something our best scientists believe is still decades away. Which means, General Harrison continued grimly, that if they decide we're a threat or unworthy of advancement, they have the capability to prevent our technological progress permanently. Sarah nodded. The being I spoke with mentioned that skill and courage matter more than sophisticated tools. I think they're more impressed by human qualities than by our technology. Captain Chen, interrupted Director James Walsh from the National Security Agency, you've established the first confirmed communication with an extraterrestrial intelligence in human history. But we need to know if this contact can be repeated and expanded. Can you reestablish communication with these entities? Before Sarah could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the briefing room in red as Colonel Matthews burst through the security doors. We have multiple contacts appearing simultaneously over every major military installation in North America, he announced breathlessly. NORAD is tracking over 40 objects, all exhibiting the same impossible flight characteristics as the one Captain Chen encountered. The briefing room erupted into controlled chaos as officials began coordinating responses. Sarah felt her heart sink as she realized what was happening. "They're not attacking," she said loudly enough to cut through the noise. "This is the next phase of their evaluation. They're testing how we respond to a larger demonstration of their capabilities." General Harrison looked up from her tactical display. "What kind of test?" "Think about it from their perspective. A single scout ship made contact with one of our pilots. Now they want to see how our military and political leaders react when faced with a clear demonstration that they have overwhelming technological superiority." Dr. Whitfield was monitoring communications from defense installations around the country. Fighter squadrons are being scrambled from multiple bases. The president has been moved to a secure location. This is exactly the kind of aggressive response that could fail whatever test they're conducting. Sarah stood up abruptly. "I need to get back in the air immediately. If they're evaluating our reaction to their presence, then having the pilot they've already communicated with attempt peaceful contact might be the only way to prevent this from escalating." "Absolutely not," Director Walsh responded firmly. "You're now the most valuable intelligence asset this country possesses. We can't risk losing you in what might be a hostile encounter." "Sir, with respect, you're thinking about this wrong. I'm not valuable because of what I know about them. I'm valuable because they've already determined I represent something they find promising in humanity. If our fighters attempt to intercept these craft, we fail their test. If I can demonstrate that we're capable of choosing diplomacy over force, we might pass it." General Harrison studied Sarah with the calculating look of someone who had made difficult decisions under pressure her entire career. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let me take the Whisper up and attempt to establish communication with the lead craft. If they're testing our response to their show of force, then demonstrating that we choose skilled diplomacy over military aggression might be exactly what they want to see." "The risk is enormous," Colonel Matthews pointed out. "If you're wrong about their intentions, you could be flying into a trap that eliminates our only point of contact with them." Sarah thought about the being she had communicated with, remembering the sense of curiosity and careful evaluation she had felt from the alien intelligence. "Colonel, I've been flying into situations other pilots considered too dangerous my entire career. This time, the stakes aren't just my life, they're the future of human civilization. I can't think of a better reason to take that risk." 20 minutes later, Sarah was back in the Whisper's cockpit, racing through pre-flight procedures as reports came in of increasing military activity around the alien craft. Fighter jets were approaching intercept positions, and tensions were escalating rapidly. "Shadowbird 1, this is Control. Multiple F-22 squadrons are converging on the objects over Colorado Springs and Cheyenne Mountain. You have less than 15 minutes before potential engagement." Sarah lifted off into a sky that felt electric with tension. Military radio traffic filled the airways as pilots reported unsuccessful attempts to intercept objects that simply vanished and reappeared at will, always staying just out of weapons range. "This is Raptor Leader to all flights. The targets are playing with us. They're demonstrating that our best fighters can't touch them." Sarah climbed rapidly toward the coordinates where the largest concentration of objects had been detected. As she approached 8,000 feet, her gravitational sensors began registering readings that made her earlier encounter look trivial. The aliens weren't just demonstrating their presence. They were showing humanity exactly how outmatched Earth's defenses really were. "Control, I'm detecting at least 12 objects in formation over the Colorado Springs complex. The gravitational distortions are off the charts." "Shadowbird 1, be advised that Raptor Leader has been authorized to attempt warning shots if the objects don't respond to communication attempts." Sarah's blood ran cold. Warning shots against beings who could manipulate space-time would likely be interpreted as an act of aggression, failing whatever test humanity was being given. "Control, patch me through to Raptor Leader immediately." "Raptor Leader, this is Shadowbird 1. Do not attempt to engage the objects. I repeat, do not engage. I'm attempting diplomatic contact." "Shadowbird 1, this is Raptor Leader. I have my orders. These objects are over restricted airspace and have not responded to identification requests." "Raptor Leader, I've previously established communication with these entities. They're conducting an evaluation of human behavior. Military engagement could have catastrophic consequences for our entire species. There was a pause before Raptor Leader responded. Shadowbird 1, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to establish peaceful contact. After that, I follow my standing orders. Sarah pushed the Whisper to its maximum climb rate, racing against time and military protocol. As she approached the formation of alien craft, her radio crackled with the familiar sensation of telepathic communication beginning. The pilot returns. Your military forces prepare for conflict despite their obvious inability to affect our vessels. We're afraid. Your demonstration of superior technology is being interpreted as a threat by those trained to defend our world. Fear is understandable, but your species must choose between aggression and wisdom. This choice will determine your future path. Sarah could see the F-22 fighters positioning themselves for attack runs, their pilots undoubtedly frustrated by targets that seemed to mock their advanced capabilities. Can you give us more time? Some of our people understand that wisdom is the better choice, but changing military minds requires demonstration, not just words. Time is a concept your species appears to waste frequently. What demonstration would convince your warriors that cooperation serves them better than conflict? Sarah made a decision that would either save humanity or doom it. Let me show them. I'm going to fly directly through your formation. If your technology is as advanced as you claim, you can avoid collision easily. But if our fighters see that you're willing to trust a human pilot enough to allow close approach, they might understand that cooperation is possible. This action places you in significant danger. Our propulsion systems generate fields that could destroy your primitive craft. I've spent my career proving that skill can overcome technological limitations. This is just another test of that philosophy. Interesting, you propose to risk your life to demonstrate trust between our species. If it helps my people understand that we should choose wisdom over fear, then yes. Sarah banked the Whisper toward the center of the alien formation, ignoring every instinct that screamed warnings about the gravitational distortions her instruments were detecting. Behind her, she could hear Raptor Leader trying to call her off. Shadowbird 1, you are approaching hostile contacts at dangerous range. Break off immediately. Instead, Sarah flew directly between two of the alien craft, feeling the Whisper shake as exotic energies washed over her airframe. The objects adjusted their positions with impossible precision, creating a corridor for her to pass through while maintaining their defensive formation. Your courage is noted, pilot. Perhaps your species possesses greater wisdom than our initial observations suggested. As Sarah emerged from the formation, the alien craft began to move in a coordinated pattern that even the most skeptical military observer would recognize as non-threatening. They maintained their positions, but oriented themselves in a way that clearly indicated peaceful intentions. Raptor Leader, do you see that? They're demonstrating non-hostile positioning. The pilot they communicated with just flew through their formation without any aggressive response. I see it, Control. These contacts just allowed an unarmed civilian aircraft to approach closer than our fighters could manage, and they adjusted their positioning to avoid any threat to the pilot. Sarah felt a wave of relief as she realized the alien's test had been passed. Humanity had been given a choice between fear and wisdom, and the presence of someone willing to risk everything for peace had tipped the balance in favor of understanding. This encounter has provided the data we required. Your species shows promise, though much growth remains necessary. Will you continue to evaluate us? In time, first, your people must learn to see beyond the limitations of their current technology. The pilot who masters small craft in challenging conditions understands something your greatest military minds have yet to grasp. What's that? That true capability comes from wisdom, courage, and skill, not from the sophistication of your tools. Remember this lesson. Others will need to understand it before your next evaluation. The alien craft rose vertically as one, accelerating beyond human comprehension before vanishing into the upper atmosphere. Sarah found herself alone in the sky once again, but this time she carried with her the knowledge that humanity had passed its first test. As she flew back to Peterson, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from ridiculed instructor pilot to humanity's first interstellar diplomat. Her colleagues had mocked her preference for small planes and challenging conditions, never understanding that these experiences were preparing her for the ultimate test of pilot skill and human character. The radio crackled with congratulations from control and expressions of amazement from military pilots who had witnessed something unprecedented. But Sarah's mind was already moving forward, wondering what other tests lay ahead and how humanity could prepare for them. Her grandfather had trained bomber crews to face impossible odds over Europe. Now Sarah, Viper, Chen had proven that the family tradition of rising to meet extraordinary challenges was very much alive. The stars above held more wonders and tests than any pilot had ever imagined, and humanity's small aircraft specialist was ready to help her species meet them all.